Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Wing and I am new to YouTube as a creator. I am trying to post a video every 2 weeks, and for this bi-weekly video I thought I'd do a VR2 Tarot is Magic's Let's Be Tarot Friends post. I thought that might be a good idea because I am so new to YouTube. I actually just posted my video a little bit over a month ago, and so I thought this would be a good way to connect with other YouTube creators and also to tell people a little bit more about myself and what this channel is about. Currently, I am focusing on posting tarot deck reviews and flip throughs, but eventually, my long term goal is actually to create a series of learning videos because teaching truly is a passion of mine. As to a little bit more about myself, I hope to go through this as I answer the questions to the original post. Here we go. So the first question is, what type of art do I look for in a deck? Historically, for the longest time, I am attracted to, I guess, cartoony style decks, and here is an example of one of those. This one here is Le Tarot Villeneuve. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. I'm really not good at French, even though I am Canadian. Um, so I find this deck, I just love the colors and artwork. But I'm not only attracted to cartoony style. So I'll give you another example of decks that I'm attracted to. And here is one. This is the Sephira Tarot. And it, to me, I think this one has a much softer, much, I don't know, classier type of look to it. It's still very much animated in style, but it is a little bit less busy, a little bit cleaner, um, and kind of, I just feel like it has a really graceful feel to it. The soft, muted colors. Uh, Another tarot deck that I think kind of shows my preference would be this one, which is the Art of Adventure Tarot. It's still very cartoony, as you can see, but it's kind of cartoony in a more quirky kind of way. And for this particular deck, I really love the color palette. The blue, purple, and pink. I just really enjoy that combo for some reason. It's bright, it's vibrant. When I look at it, it makes me happy. So this whole deck is just weird and happy. And this is just some of the things that I like. And as I go through these questions, I hope to show you some of the other style of the decks in my collection. The second question is, what do I search for in a tarot deck? So there's nothing in particular, just mainly artwork. And I mentioned in my first response that I'm generally attracted to cartoony style decks, but I found that in the last few years, my taste has started to evolve a little, and I am now attracted to slightly darker and creepier decks. So this here is a great example of that. Another deck that I've been thing that I really like is this here, the Somnia Tarot. It's a deck, it's a photography deck, and I don't generally like it, but there's something about these people where they're all hooded and covered up, and it seems like they're suffocating and I and suffering. Look at all these cards. There seems to be a lot of pain going on, and I'm just really attracted to this particular feeling. Another one. Oh, here's another one. This is the luminous void, sorry, not the illuminous, luminous. I seen this deck around for years and years, and for the longest time, I didn't like it at all. I think the artwork is just horrific and not pretty to my taste. And then for some reason, all of a sudden, one day, I just saw a posting of it, and I couldn't stop staring at the images. They just I don't know what some of these mean. Like how does this represent the high priestess for instance? I don't know, but I just I can't stop staring at these images, and I know I just had to get one. And this is actually one of the first deck that started me on the journey to the darker side of tarot. The next question is, what deck am I most intrigued by right now? So it's not one particular deck so much as a style. I am really into Marseille and Pip decks these days. So for the longest part, for most of my tarot journey, I have been reading exclusively with Rider-Waite-Smith. And honestly, I thought Marseille and Pip decks were kind of boring, to be quite honest. But I learned that these decks requires you to read them in a different way. And once I learned that, I just became really intrigued. And I find that reading Marseille requires a little bit more patience, requires a little bit more focus, and just a bit more effort in general. But it's really rewarding once you get a good reading out of it for the first time. And I've been studying it. I am by no means what I consider myself a fluent, but I do try to read with the Marseille deck at least once every few days just to keep on practicing. This one here is called the Nouveau Tarot de Marseille, and it's one of two of my favorite Marseille decks. I love the color in this deck. The other deck that I am really in love with right now is this one here. It is called Torochi 23, so named because it was published in 2023. I love the people in this deck. I love their facial expression. There's something really like they're tired and comical looking at the same time, and I feel like that's how I feel a lot of days, especially on a work day. So I feel like I can relate to these people quite a bit. I also love the color palette on here. But the one card that made me fall in love with this deck is the Hanged Man. And I'm going to see if it comes up. There it is. I love this expression on his face. It's so sly, and so he looks so comfortable in this position, and I think it's really unique for Hangman. And so that is what types of decks I'm into right now. Is there a card in a deck that I always look for first? So no, I just look for the artwork in general, and if I like it, I will tend to like the entire deck. But having that said, there are usually cards within a deck that's my favorite, and it's not any one specific card. So it's not always the Seven of Pentacles or the Aces. It depends on the deck. And usually those favorite cards in those decks are ones that tend to differ from the Rider-Waite-Smith imageries, and it will present that scene in such a way that it expands upon my understanding of the card. Like it just gives it an entirely new perspective, and I would interpret it in a way that I normally wouldn't if it was just a RWS replica. So those cards tend to be the ones that stand out to me. And the next question is, if there's a card that I really don't like, would it make me not buy the deck or pass it on? To be quite honest, I have never came across that. I've never experienced where there was just one card that was so repulsive to me that I can't handle the entire deck. Whereas I have cards that I actually really like, there's really no cards that I hate. I can't think of any deck where that has been the case. And I'm stopping here because I want to point out like this card in particular is one of the examples of why I love this artist. This here is the Tarot of the Abyss by Anatorian, and just the perspective, like the way I feel like we're right in the card. I'm this person that's reaching out to this woman with a young child on her back, and it 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 draws you right into the scene, and I freaking love it. The next question is your favorite and least favorite card. So I don't have a favorite or a least favorite. To me, every card in the tarot deck has a different message and they are all equally important. But having that said, I do want to speak about this a little bit. This deck here is called the Steampunk Propaganda. It's actually a deck I made myself. It's a collage deck using old propaganda posters, primarily Chinese propaganda posters, but there's some Korean one. I think this is a Korean one, and there is American propaganda posters in here as well. And when I was working on this deck, the card I enjoyed making most was actually the Hierophant. Here I chose an image of a young man helping an old lady to unravel and rewind her yarn. And that really just, to me, this is the message of this card. It's about tradition and values and things that we hold dear, things that we want to pass down to the next generation. And I just think this is a really beautiful message. The next question is, what do people close to you feel about tarot and about you doing tarot? So, in my life, I don't have a lot of people who practice tarot. I am very, very fortunate that I have one close friend who also practices. So, she's my go to person when I want to just gush and rant about my tarot experiences. But for the most part, my spouse and my siblings, they don't practice tarot. They're not really into this scene, but they are all really supportive. But I do have a story about that. I'm a bit older, and I feel I come from a generation where I felt that tarot was still a little bit cliche. And so for the longest time, I was actually afraid to tell people outside my close family and friends that I was a tarot reader. And at work, there was this thing called a shout out program where you can recognize a peer for doing something good. And I was recognized for this. And at the end of the quarter, everyone who has been given a shout out will enter a draw, and I won. And the prize was that I can pick uh, an item of a certain value, a certain dollar amount at a few participating stores. And one of them was Chapters Indigo, which is a Canadian book retailer. And I knew I wanted this deck. This is the Steampunk Tarot by Barbara Moore, but I was afraid to select this gift because I didn't want my manager to know that I was a tarot reader. So I actually went and chose a book that was closest in dollar value to this deck. So when I got it, I went and returned it and said it was a gift, which it was, and bought this deck instead. Um, but I did eventually, like one day, I just brought a deck to work for some reason, and one of my coworkers saw it and they got really excited. And I actually just spent half that day just doing reading with my coworkers. And that was when I realized like people are really more, society in general is more receptive than I think. And that one day was actually what made me realize that I really like doing tarot. And not to sound arrogant, but I thought like, oh, I'm actually kind of good at this. And that was what propelled me to pick up tarot as a side gig, to actually start doing it and pursuing it as more than just a personal hobby. That was a really, really rewarding day for me, and to this day, I still cherish it. How do I feel about esoteric teachings in tarot? I love it. I absolutely love it. I think it is so fascinating. I love how there are so many different occult and philosophical spiritual systems embedded in it. It was through tarot that I discovered the Kabbalah, and I just think this is like the most fascinating thing. I love studying it, reading about it. By no means am I an expert, but every time I can get my hand on a good book, I'm all over it. Having that said, I don't actually like working with esoteric decks. So I had a couple and I ended up selling all of them because I actually find that I can't read with it. While I use it to study, to learn, they just don't give me good practical readings. I don't know how to incorporate the astrology, the Kabbalah symbolisms into an everyday reading. I can't figure it out. And that leads to the next question, actually, which is which style do we prefer, Rider-Waite-Smith, Marseille, or Thoth? I don't read with Thoth at all. I have a couple of Thoth decks, and I love looking at it, but they just they just don't do it for me. I can't read with them. I like I said before, I'm a Rider-Waite-Smith girl, and I am starting to get into Marseille because I think Marseille, the way you read with it, it is just it is pure intuition, and I love that. So that is kind of opposite of those and all the esoteric decks, which is very intellectual. I love the intellectual process as a learning system, as a way to help me expand my knowledge, my beliefs, and my worldview. But for tarot readings, they just it's not even the same thing. I don't know how else to explain it. My thoughts on cardstock. My favorite type of cardstocks tends to be from just general mass market decks. I find that they have a good type of thickness. They're not too thick and they tend to be smooth, so you can actually fan them out really well like this. And that's how I choose my cards. So this feature is kind of important to me. I know that a lot of people decide their cardstock preference based on how well they shuffle, and that's important to me as well. But I can shuffle in different ways. So that's not terribly important. While I do like decks where I can riffle shuffle, it's definitely their ability to fan out. And the funny thing is, like a lot of indie card stock, they would advertise themselves as having a better card stock, but I find that some of them are not smooth and some of them are too thick. And kind of like this one, like they kind of, when you fan them out, they kind of open up in chunks. So you see a big chunk here, big chunk here, big chunk here, and I end up having to go in and kind of like manually expand upon them. So I actually don't prefer that. And I actually just want to take a second to point out the deck with the most awful cardstock that I have ever seen is this ASL Tarot here. And it is just way too thick, and it's thick in a way that's not a good quality. They just look like they look like cardboard. And this was probably one of the most this is the second most disappointing Kickstarter campaign I've ever backed. It came with this box that is supposed to be a book and it's supposed to be really cool, but like the creator chose a cardstock that is too thick, so it actually doesn't fit into the box that he designed for this deck, and it took a really long time. He started ignoring people, and to be honest, I didn't think I was ever going to get a copy of it. Look at this deck. It is like twice as thick as the standard mass market deck for no reason. Like I have another deck that's really thick, but it's because of the material. But this one is just bad. I don't know what else to say. But having that said, now that I do have it, the artwork makes up for the unprofessional way he managed the campaign and the cardstock. I love the color and I love what this deck does. It's American Sign Language. That's what it stands for. And I just think it's different type of inclusivity. People talk about how important diversity for them is. And when we think of diversity, I think I myself often think about like skin color and body size, but different types of ability. And I know that there are certain, like in the newer decks, there are people that are in wheelchair because that's a very visible disability that we can include. But this deck here just talks about the types of different various abilities that's hard to see visually. And I think this is an amazing deck in terms of art. The next question is bags or boxes. And I know a lot of people prefer bags, but I am boxes all the way. I actually really like making my own box or making or decorating my own box for decks. And this is a box that I decorated for my steampunk deck. And this here is a box that I made from scratch for my TarotTube 23. I really enjoy the process of making these boxes. I feel like it helps me connect with the cards. Fortunately and unfortunately, I don't know if it's a good thing or not. I started getting into indie decks, and a lot of indie decks already come with really beautiful boxes. So I don't go and replace it when it comes with just a box that is the size of the decks. You know how some mass market decks they will come with like really big box because it comes with a really big guidebook. So which an example is the steampunk here. So whenever it comes with a really big box, I'll take it out of the box and make my own box. I really enjoy that process. How did I get into tarot? It's actually completely by accident. So, as a kid, I loved reading and I would often just spend like hours at the local bookstore. And one day, the bookstore I went to just rearranged their stock and their layout. And now the young adult section was beside the new age section. And I just happened to see this. This one here is the Arthurian Legend Tarot. And it blew my mind. Like I was so excited. Like I nearly pissed my pants. I didn't know you can just buy a tarot deck in a bookstore. I thought you had to like go to some like creepy little side street in New York City and find this occult shop that only opens at midnight and that's where you find it. Like I didn't know that as a normal person from a small town, you can just pick up a deck at a bookstore. So I spent the money I was going to spend on the Sweet Valley Twins on this deck and I never looked back. What is the best tarot news? So for me, it was that the Victorian Fairy Tarot had a Kickstarter campaign last year. That was really exciting for me. For those who don't know, the Victorian Fairy Tarot was a mass market deck that went out of print, and I had known about it while it was still in print, and it was one of those decks that was just sitting in my shopping cart in my Amazon account for months. And you know how sometimes they say, "Oh, there's only like two left in stock," and I was just like, "Yeah, whatever." And I didn't get it, and it went out of print, and it never came back, and I was so devastated. And throughout the years, I've seen them in like the market and the Facebook marketplaces, but they were so expensive that I can't justify it. Like if I just wasn't an idiot back then, I would have had paid like what $20, $30 for it. I'm not going to spend $200 on it now. But every time I see it, like my heart just aches a little for it. And when they announced that they were doing a reprint via Kickstarter, I was just like, take my money now. How many decks are on my wish list right now? I am very happy to say at the moment there are only three. The first is the Oriental Tarot 1845. The second is the Tarot of Echoes by Anatorian. I am waiting for the mass market version of that to come out. I know that some people prefer the indie version whenever they can get a hold of it, but for me, I'm really mainly interested in the actual card imageries themselves. So the cardstock and the packaging doesn't really doesn't really make a difference to me. So I have no problem waiting for the mass market. The third is the Curious Traveler. If anyone knows what's going on with that deck, please let me know. I found out about it during its Kickstarter campaign, but at the time it was only shipping to US. And towards the end of the campaign, there was news that it got picked up by US Games, and I've been eagerly awaiting since then. But I haven't heard anything else, so I hope it's still happening. But in terms of wish list, I do have a story similar to Tarot's Magic when she was saying that she tried to do a no buy year and failed. I've tried that many, many times and failed many, many times. So it's the point where there was nothing to learn anymore. It was just pure failure. But I am happy to say that I think I finally gotten over that tarot materialism, that obsession of always needing a new deck. I haven't bought a deck in a tarot deck in all of 2024, and I have seen a couple of really beautiful decks, and I think I am okay to just say, you know what? I know I'm not going to read with it. I already have a lot and I have plenty. I am grateful for the decks I have, and I have been able to resist so far all year. So I'm hoping this maturity can last. This next question was really difficult for me to answer. The question is, if I can only keep three tarot decks, what would they be and why? I think the answer depends on why I can only keep three decks. So let's say if there is an apocalypse, in that case, I would feel the responsibility to retain knowledge for future generations. In that case, I would definitely choose the original Rider-Waite-Smith, the original Thoth, and a Marseille deck. But If it's a purely personal reason, and let's say I'm just downsizing my home and I don't have the space for all my tarot decks, in that case, I just honestly, I don't know. I literally sat in front of my tarot shelf for goodness knows how long. Felt like forever, an eternity, and then some, and I still can't choose. But one of the decks that made it into the finalist, like the top 20, is this one here, is the Tarot of the Starbound Fantasia. I love the color, I love the artwork, and so this here is a Thoth deck, oddly, which I have said earlier that I can't really read well with, but for some reason I get really, really good readings with this deck. So because it is so unique to me, that it is a Thoth deck that I can actually read with, it's definitely a top contender, but I don't actually know if it's top three. The next question is, how does knowing tarot influence my everyday? I think that knowing tarot helps me be more positive, and that is the greatest contribution for tarot in my life. I am not a very naturally positive person. I do have a tendency to dwell on the things that make me angry, the things that makes me scared, and the things that make me feel bad about myself. But when I read tarot for others, I always emphasize that tarot is empowering. It gives us choice. Once we know who we are, we can choose to be different. And so when I started reading for other people, I felt like it's only fair that I take my own advice. So in that way, tarot has really helped me improve my mental state of being, my emotional state of being. And that's how tarot changed my everyday life. And the next question is, if you can turn back time, would you learn tarot in any other way? And the answer is no. I didn't learn it the most practical way. I was a very studious person while I was in school, and I approached tarot the way I would approach it if it was a course. I read up on it, I took notes, and then I made summary of my notes, and I highlighted, I used different color pens, and it was a very intellectual process. And I overemphasize the intellectual and underemphasize the intuitive. So I think that actually delayed my process. But having that said, I actually really enjoy that process. I like that that process of learning and I wouldn't trade that for the world. So I think my understanding of tarot is different because I learned it the slow way. The next question is our thoughts on the Three of Swords. And for this one, I am 1,700% with Tarot is Magic on this one. You would see all these decks that are completely, absolutely gorgeous with very unique imageries. And then you get to the Three of Swords, and it's just that same image of the three swords stabbing through a heart. And now I'm wondering, is there some kind of tradition amongst tarot creators that I don't know about that says that for tradition's sake or something esoteric, I don't know, that that particular card must remain the same? If someone know, please let me know. But that is actually why I want to show this particular Three of Swords. This one is from the Tarot of the Silicon Dawn. I think it's different, and not only is it different, it's actually one of the most difficult tarot cards I've ever seen. Whenever I look at it, it makes me want to puke, and at the same time, I can't look away. It's one of my favorite cards of all time, just because it produces such a deep emotion. And I actually want to read a couple of lines from the guidebook to give you an idea what this card is about. She's plunging swords into her womb, not her heart, killing her potential for creation, but she's enjoying it oh so much. The blood dripping down her front and back feels so good. Sensual pleasures taken in ways that will never result in children. To me, I think this card is about that addiction to pain. You are so addicted that you're foregoing not just the present, but you're sacrificing your entire future to sustain this addiction to pain. And I think it's such a powerful and scary thing. If I can befriend one person on TarotTube or the tarot world, who would it be? The first person that came to my mind was Aleister Crowley. But for someone who is alive, it would be Miss Benabel Wen. She is Taiwanese American. I myself am Cantonese Canadian, so we share the same Chinese culture, and she's very knowledgeable in the esoteric occult aspect of Chinese culture. I am currently reading her book on I Ching, and I am loving it. I would love to pick her brain to learn more about it. Unfortunately, I can't actually read Chinese, so I can't study the culture in its original language. So I really, really, really appreciate her book on the I Ching. And the next question, the last question actually is there a favorite part of the day to do tarot? No, I do it whenever I have some time or whenever I have a question. I did try to develop a practice where I do it a certain time in the day. I tried the morning, I tried the night, and I actually didn't like the structure. I find that when I was doing that, I was doing it to say I was doing it, going through the motion because I'm supposed to. And it wasn't, I didn't feel spiritual. I didn't feel in tune with myself. But whereas if I pick it up whenever I feel the need, I am much, much more connected with the cards. And so that is my answers to this question. And thank you everyone for watching. And I hope you have a great day.